There is a name that is not a name. It appears in the 3rd chapter of Exodus in the story of a burning bush that is not consumed. A shepherd named Moses approaches. A voice speaks from the fire. The voice identifies itself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It commissions Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But Moses asks a question. He knows that the people will want to know who has sent him. They will ask for a name. And in the ancient world, a name was not a label. A name was a revelation, an access to the nature, the power, the identity of the one named. Moses says, "If they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I tell them?" The voice answers, "I am who I am." Then, as if translating this into a usable form, say this to the people of Israel, "I am has sent me to you." The name is not a noun, it is a verb, not a label, an assertion, not a description, it is a presence. I am. Not I was, not I will be, not I am this or I am that, not I am the God of thunder or the God of war or the God of wisdom. Simply, purely, completely, I am. So this is the same being that Aquinas 2,000 years later would call Ipsum Esse Subsistens, that is, being itself subsisting. The one whose essence is to exist, the one who does not receive being but is being. Now the philosophers arrived at this conclusion through logic, causation, and the distinction between essence and existence. The shepherd, however, arrived at this conclusion through a voice from a burning bush. They arrived, both of them, at the same place. Now, we must ask, what does it mean for God to say, "I am"? It does not mean that God is the most powerful being, though he is that. It does not mean that God is the most wise being, though he is that. It does not mean that God is the most good being, though he is that. It means that God is being, not a being among beings, being itself from which all beings derive their existence. The source, the ground, the sustainer. Every other being has existence. God is existence. Every other being participates in being. God is the participation. Every other being receives existence from another. God is the giver, the gift, and the giving. This is why the medievals said that God is simple. Not simple in the sense of easy to understand. Simple in the sense of not composed of parts. No essence distinct from existence, no substance distinct from attributes, and no potentiality waiting to become actuality. God is not a composite. God is not a collection. God is not a being with properties. God is the properties, undivided, uncompounded, and infinite. So when we say God is good, we are not saying that God participates in goodness. We are saying that God is goodness, and that what we call goodness in creatures is a participation in God. When we say God is wise, we are not saying that God possesses wisdom. We are saying that God is wisdom, and that what we call wisdom in creatures is a reflection of God. When we say God is love, we are not saying that God feels love. We are saying that God is love, and that what we call love in creatures is an image of God. All attributes are identical with the divine essence, and the divine essence is identical with existence. God is not good, wise, loving, and existent. God is goodness, wisdom, love, existence, one simple and indivisible. Now consider the implications of this doctrine. If God is being itself, then every existing thing is a participation in God. Not a part of God, that is pantheism, not a separate product of God, that is deism. A participation, an image, a reflection. The tree exists. Its existence is not its own. It receives existence from being itself. The tree is a participant in the divine act of being, not God, but from God, not the source, but the stream. The human being exists. Its existence is not its own. It receives its existence from being itself. The human is a participant in the divine act of being, not God, but from God, not the source, but the image. This is why Aquinas says that God is in all things, not as a part of their essence, but as the cause of their existence. The presence of the cause is in the effect. The heat of the fire is in the heated water. The light of the sun is in the illuminated air. The being of God is in every existing thing. So, that's not physically, not spatially, ontologically. That is how the being of God is in every existing thing, and it is at the deepest level of reality, the level of existence itself, every creature sustained by the continuous act of the Creator. If God stopped thinking the universe for 1 millisecond, the universe would not merely die, it would vanish. It would be as if it had never been, because its existence is not its own. It is borrowed, received, participated. That tree does not hold its own existence, it is held. Now, we must ask, if God is being itself, and if every creature participates in God's being, what is the relationship between the creature and God? Not identity. The creature is not God. The creature's essence is not existence. The creature's being is received, not original. The creature is a likeness, not a copy. But not separation either. The creature is not independent. The creature does not exist alongside God as one being among others. God is not a being. God is being. The creature exists in God, as an effect exists in its cause, as an image exists in its source, as a thought exists in the mind that thinks it. It is the doctrine of participation. It is the middle path between pantheism and deism, between absorption and abandonment. The creature is not God, but the creature cannot exist without God. The creature is distinct, but not separate. The creature is other, but not alien. The tree participates in being. The human participates in being, and the angel participates in being, and each according to its nature, each receiving existence according to its capacity. But the being that they receive is the same being, the one being, the being that God is. That is why the medievals said that all beings are analogous, not univocal, though they do not share a single definition of being. Not equivocal, they are not unrelated homonyms. Analogical, proportional. The being of the tree is to the being of God as the tree's existence is to its source. And we cannot say that God exists in the same way that trees exist. That would be univocal prediction. It would reduce God to a being among beings. We cannot say that God exists in a completely different way, unrelated to tree existence. That would be equivocal predication, and it would make knowledge of God impossible. We say God exists as the cause of his existence. The tree exists as the effect of existence. The cause is not the effect, but the effect reveals the cause. Now, the burning bush reveals the fire. The fire is not the bush, but the bush would not burn without the fire. Now we must confront the most difficult question. If God is being itself, simple, eternal, immutable, infinite, how can God be personal? Well, personality seems to imply composition. A person has attributes, knowledge, will, memory, emotion. A person changes over time, learns, decides, remembers, anticipates. A person relates to others, speaks, listens, loves, suffers. But God is simple. God does not have attributes. God is his attributes. God does not change. God is eternal. without, before, or after. God does not relate to others as one being among beings. God is the ground of all being. How can such a being be a person, then? Well, Aquinas answers it this way. Personality is a perfection. To be a person is to be a subject, an agent, a self. These are not imperfections, they are the highest actualizations of being. A stone is not a person, a plant is not a person, an animal is not a person, a human is a person, an angel is a person. And God, who is the most perfect being, must possess all perfections. But God possesses them simply, not as a collection of attributes, but as a single undifferentiated act. God does not have knowledge, God is knowledge. God does not have will, God is will. God does not have love, God is love. And because God is simple, these are not different things. God's knowledge is God's will, is God's love, is God's being. And the same simple act that is existence is also intelligence, volition, relation. This is a mystery. It cannot be fully comprehended by the finite mind, but it can be apprehended. We can see that it must be so, even if we cannot see how it is so. God is being itself. Being itself is personal. Not a person among persons. Personality itself, subsisting. Okay, so here's what you've learned. You've learned that the name revealed to Moses, I am who I am, is not a label but an assertion. It identifies God not as a being among beings, but as being itself, the source and ground of all existence. You have learned that God's simplicity means that God has no composition. Essence and existence are identical. Attributes are identical with essence. God is not good, wise, loving, and existent. God is goodness, wisdom, love, existence, one, simple, indivisible. You have learned that every creature participates in God's being, not as a part of God, not as a separate product, but as an image, a likeness, a effect. The creature exists because God holds it in existence, continuously, without interruption. And you have learned that being itself is personal, not a person among persons, but personality itself, subsisting, the source of all subjecthood, all agency, and all selfhood. The I who says I am. And remember, the philosophers arrived at being itself through logic. The shepherd arrived at being itself through a voice, and they arrived at the same place. But the shepherd heard something that the philosophers did not hear. He heard a voice, he heard a name, he heard an I. The philosophers proved that the I must exist. The shepherd heard the I speak. The question is not whether the I exists. The question is, what did it say? Thank you.